Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So now we're on The Silver Chair, and my god, but this book cover is ugly. Seriously, I don't know what they were thinking. What were Collier Books thinking? This is awful. This is just 9 different kinds of awful. So, interestingly enough, we didn't actually have the complete set of the ones of the particular publication that I had been doing before. So our copy of The Silver Chair in my house is actually this cover. This particular cover is attributed to one Stephen Lavis, which you can see actually cover illustration by Stephen Lavis. And this was published this particular time by Fontana Lyons in 1980. So this is the most recent Narnia publication variant in the house for me. As you can see, because this is a very, very 1980s cover with the photorealistic cover painting, very, very... It's a very 80s cover in its way. It's lacking the kind of abstraction that, you would get in, like, the 60s and 70s. It's a thing that you don't really... They do it a lot less now, I feel. I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't spent that much time in the YA bookstore lately. And I don't just mean during 2020, the disaster that it was. I mean, it's not some place that I've been huge amounts lately. Anyways, so it's an interesting cover, and it's still better than the one in the Collier edition, because, like, 90% of everything is better than the Collier edition covers. I find the haircuts of the two kids, very of what I assume is supposed to be Jill Pole and Eustace Scrubb, they're very 80s cuts, and it is slightly problematic because, of course, these are supposed to be children in the early 50s, and I could be wrong occasionally, possibly even frequently. My grasp of details of fashion of the 1950s, especially for children, will not necessarily be all that it could be. But, yeah, I think Eustace's hair is a little bit lacking in the formality one would expect of the period, and Jill's hair is even less so, because there were things that were mandatory for girls in the 50s that simply is not representative of. In any event, so this book picks up not long in Earth time, although probably about 70 years later in Narnia time, after the voyage of the Dawn Treader. So at the end of the voyage of the Dawn Treader, Lucy and Edmund were told, you can never return to Narnia. And it is the you can never return to Narnia thing has always been one of these slightly odd things about the Narnia series. I have to assume that there is some sort of reason beyond, Lewis wanting to ensure that all of his protagonists are children and relatable to children. But I couldn't tell you for sure. This book is another one in the series, because the last one I had my disquisition on the fact that Eustace Scrubb isn't nearly as problematic as the book likes to make him out to be, because, as I said in the last book, there are a lot of things being thrown at him that he simply has no possible rational reason to be able to cope well with, and the fact that he's not coping well with them is actually no reflection on him, but a reflection on the fact that everyone around him is pretending that he somehow doesn't deserve the opportunity to, like, adjust. In this book, it's very good and very enjoyable, but I grant that I do have a bit of a cranky thing with Jill and Aslan, because right at the start of this book, Eustace and Jill, they meet up, and Eustace walks in on Jill, who is having a good cry behind the gym, and as C.S. Lewis rightly points out, having somebody barge in on you when you're in the midst of a good cry can sometimes be the most disconcerting and upsetting thing, and it's really not very nice when you're not actually finished sobbing your heart out to have somebody come by and talk at you. It is one of the things that I do like about C.S. Lewis is that he does have a certain empathy for things like, you know, if you're having a moment, sometimes it's really, really just the worst thing in the world to interrupt a person who is having a moment of whatever kind. But anyhow, so they wind up getting into the world of Narnia, though, of course, not Narnia directly. And as they're walking along, they stumble across a cliff, and after the various events that occur at the top of the cliff happen, Aslan basically gets Jill to admit, well, I was showing off. Except that, to an extent, what happened at the top of the cliff actually didn't read to me much like showing off. Because you know, there's the moment when she says, you know, that she becomes aggravated because Scrubb pulls her back just as if I was a kid. And so, yes, for a moment she's showing off by going up closer to the edge of the cliff than she should. But the problem is that the reason that he falls is because she looks down over the edge of the cliff and then realizes exactly how high up it is and freaks out. And at that moment, it says, but by now she had no control over her arms and legs. There was a moment struggling on the cliff edge. Jill was too frightened and dizzy to know quite what she was doing. And the thing is that's depicting somebody who has gone into a panic, and at the moment that Eustace gets accidentally pitched over the cliff, she's basically having a panic attack of her own. And because of that, to blame her for having a panic attack, rethinking her position, and then getting interrupted, and it goes a little bit too far. But anyway, so Jill is told that she and Eustace have this task, and the task is supposed to be that they are, you know, supposed to do a series of things, and there are 4 signs, and Eustace, when he arrives in Narnia, was supposed to talk to an old friend. And when Jill arrives, she, you know, rushes up, and when Jill catches up to him, she rushes up to Eustace and says, so, who is this person, this old friend? You must have seen him. You have to go talk to him. And he's looking around and he says, I don't see anybody that I know. And, you know, they complain later on that they muffed the first sign, but again, it's not really muffing a sign, because I'm not entirely certain that Eustace would have actually recognized Caspian to begin with, because Caspian is now like 70, 80 years old, and yeah, Eustace had no reason to just even think that was Caspian, so I don't even know. Anyways, but this is a book that gets I think a little darker in places than some of the others. And their quest to find Prince Rilian is... It's not like Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is just kind of an episodic romp. And Prince Caspian sort of, it works up to an objective that everybody can see and know exactly what they're going for. Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe. But this one doesn't really have a triumphant rush at the end. It really, really doesn't. And indeed, the transportation back home, when they go back to England for Jill and Eustace, I mean, they get the glorious moment of having a, fully armed young King Caspian at their side as they go freak out the bullies that have been, harassing everybody at their school. But it lacks the sort of upward bounding gloriousness that you got in Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe when, they won the battle and you have that moment talking about them being crowned and standing at the ocean's edge and, do you remember the sound of the gulls and the waves? Do you remember? It's very, very uplifting. And at the end of Prince Caspian, you have that glorious rush when the Telmarines are defeated. And Voyage of the Dawn Treader, as I said, it's very episodic, and its ending has a sort of common uplift, but the ending of this one is very much a rush. Now, that said, in a way, I kind of enjoy this a lot for Jill and Eustace, because neither Jill nor Eustace are, Lucy. And the thing about Lucy is that Lucy is a paragon. Lucy is a saint. Lucy has been in the other books, and Lucy always has this undying, solid, unbreakable belief in Aslan. And it is one of the driving characteristics of her. One of the things that is used to drive the books forward is the way that Lucy never stops having faith. Lucy is steadfast like nothing else. And indeed, interestingly enough, of course, Edmund, having been a traitor and then come back into the fold, is also remarkably steadfast because he will always back Lucy, because the first time he didn't and everything got screwed up because of that. And neither Jill nor Eustace have that. Jill is, she plugs away at things. She's trying to stick this out, but she's very, very unsure, and she's not used to what's going on. And Eustace is sort of brave and driving forward, but it really, really makes this interesting because it's very lacking in that constant reiteration of that constant faith and driving forward and uplifting character of the other books. They find Prince Rilian, but it's, and they defeat the witch that kidnapped him, but there's no glorious rush home. It's a slow trudge through the Underland, finding their way back to Narnia, and it's dark and it's frightening in its way. And so this book feels very, very different from the others, which is very oddly symbolized, and I didn't even go through this. It starts with flying on Owlback, which is actually kind of conceptually frightening. And the Underland is filled with creepy monsters that are asleep. And like I said, the leaving is this long, frightening trudge through an eerily lit cavern, and it makes this a very, very different book from the others in the series. And the last one, of course, is different again, but we'll get to that when I get to it, assuming I don't give up and decide not to do that, because it is not my favorite book in this series. Anyways, I'm running out of time on my timer, so that's everything I'm going to say, and I will see you all next week.